Hey everyone, welcome to Locked On Lakers for Friday. Brian Kamenetsky, Andy Kamenetsky. LeBron James is back for Friday night. Maybe? That's next.
You are Locked On Lakers, your daily Los Angeles Lakers podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Thanks to everybody for making Locked On Lakers your first listen of every day, Monday through Friday, no matter how or where you get your podcasts. You can always find fresh content from us. And Locked On Lakers on YouTube, Andy, is where you go to see the show. Generally speaking, get it a few hours early, too, compared to the audio product, particularly on non-game nights, of which the Lakers have had many this week. Good week for the for tuning in early on the YouTube channel. I want to let you know that today's episode is brought to you by BetOnline. BetOnline has you covered this season with more props, odds, and lines than ever before. BetOnline, where the game starts. So there are a few things we want to get into. You had a really interesting conversation, have had a really interesting conversation throughout the day with our friend Darius Soriano, where is he? He's like everywhere now, including with the Lakers.
Yeah, he is going to be, and it's a great get for the Lakers. He is now writing pieces for the Lakers, just like Mike Trudell,
Yes.
who covers the team for the Lakers. And Mike, Pete, and Darius are the tri-hosts of Lakers Film Room podcast, and Darius also does some contributing to Silver Screen and Roll, which was the article that led to me retweeting it because it was good at Cam Brothers, but also then discussing it with Darius just because there's some interesting stuff that he brought up in it.
Yeah, and the Laker Film Room podcast is one of the few that I leave on permanent download status because it tends to take up room on my phone, but I'm not deleting that one.
It's a good show.
That one's too good. So we'll get to that in a minute. A question just occurred to me that I want to ask you, not on our script, out of the blue. I'm going to get your honest, raw opinion before the show is over. But let's start with the news. Yes, it's basically that. Let's start with the news. Thursday afternoon, the Lakers practiced one more day of practice before this long week off before they play the Pistons on Friday tonight. And LeBron James practiced. It was he did non-contact just like he did on Wednesday. But the wrinkle here, Andy, everyone was non-contact, no touching, nobody contacting anybody. Darvin Ham said that LeBron looked great. He was running, he was leaping, he was prancing, he was doing all of those things. So at the very least, he's been upgraded to questionable. It certainly seems like he could be on track to play, if not Friday, certainly Sunday.
Yeah, I mean, it's really difficult to read into this when, contact specifically with a groin injury, which is as much about just re-aggravation as it is with healing, pain tolerance, all of that. It's just
nobody should be contacting LeBron's groin during practice. That should be off limits.
Oh, man, I think everybody is secure with their masculinity, and if things happen to rub up against each other, let's be professionals. But as opposed to like Dennis Schroder and Thomas Bryant, who took part in this no contact practice, but everybody, including, I believe, Dennis Schroder, has acknowledged that unless there is a setback that nobody foresees coming, Schroder and Bryant are going to be available for Friday's game. It is difficult to read into this with LeBron. Like, if LeBron had not taken part in a contact practice, I know you and I disagreed on this with Wednesday's show, I would be strongly inclined, or Thursday's show, I'd be strongly inclined to say he ain't playing on Friday if he's not deemed able to do
if the Lakers are going full on contact practice today and LeBron only did the non-contact parts, that would mean to you that he wasn't going to play tonight.
Right. But it is also difficult to read exactly into what full participation in a non-contact practice means. But if nothing else, it is good that he's been moved up to questionable.
Yeah. I mean, again, and the running and the jumping part, Darvin talking about it in that way is obviously encouraging as well. It's a weird thing because on the one hand, similar to Brooklyn, who bad front line, team in a slump, not doing, not that good a team right now. That's a game that the Lakers can and ultimately did win without LeBron James. Detroit is the same. And this is not a good Pistons team. Lots of young talent, intriguing young players, blah, blah, blah. Right now, they're not very good. And so you ought to be able to win that game with Anthony Davis and, the couple guys who are returning. Play the same game you did against Brooklyn. The flip side of that, though, Andy, is you just can't muck around with this game. Like this one is as important. The games against the bad teams, Friday, Sunday against San Antonio, are ultimately more important than the game, say, Tuesday against Phoenix, where you look at that as a road game. If things are going well, if you have a team that's, performing as a contender, you can lose in Phoenix to the Suns. It's tonight's game. It's Sunday's game. They can't afford to give away. So, there are reasons to sit LeBron out if he's not quite there yet. And there are a lot of motivations to play him if he can get on the court.
Yeah, I mean, I think ultimately you have to weigh on the side of wisdom and cautiousness just because it's a long season. And if you win this game against Detroit, but in the process re-aggravate that groin and LeBron is out longer, that is not worth the one win, even in the situation the Lakers are in. Before we get, Bryant, to this film session that apparently everybody recently found very useful and maybe paid dividends before the Brooklyn game that we didn't end up talking about. This was something I saw, I believe it was from Dan Wojcicki from the LA Times in a piece that he wrote about that film session. Wednesday's practice, we knew Max Christie wasn't available. I did not see this. Apparently, Juan Toscano-Anderson was also not available because he's been day-to-day with back soreness. And the reason I bring that up, just the idea of who knows if JTA is available for Friday, he's been getting very few minutes of late. And I had assumed that he had just fallen out of the rotation. Mm-hmm. Learning that he's had this back soreness, I wonder if they've actually just been limiting his minutes as opposed to him just not playing. And I don't know the answer to that. I just thought it was
neither do I. No, but it would be different
because he's somebody they could use just as a player profile out there. So him not playing feels, if nothing else, significant in the way Darvin views his options potentially.
Yeah, it would be like different if we found out that Kendrick Nunn suddenly had a back problem. Like, Kendrick, why don't you sit down? You got a back problem. The JTA thing is really interesting to me because, both of us had high hopes for, not in the same way as like Nunn. And like, I really thought Nunn was going to be a major nightly contributor to this team and obviously been dead wrong so far. JTA is a different kind of thing because he has a skill set that is valuable. Good passing, big, smart player, smart defender, but is limited. When we did our season preview, everybody kind of, when we're talking about each individual player, like the new guys that they signed and new players that they brought in, like everybody kind of agreed when we did the JTA episode, like if you're relying on to play like 25 minutes, 30 minutes a night, like that's too much. He's a 15 to 20 minute guy in the right role. And I wonder if sometimes he's a little bit limited in how effective he can be because there are so many other limited role players around him. He is a guy whose skill set, perhaps a little bit like Austin Reeves, does better with better players, as kind of a fill-in glue guy. So whether it's the back, whether it's just matchups, whether it's the style of play, whatever it is, why JT, if it is a playing thing issue and not a health thing, why he's not playing is something that I would definitely love to learn about. Andy, you mentioned the big players meeting before the Nets game. That is something that has made news this week, and we will get to that next.
Locked On Lakers is brought to you by Masterclass. If you're looking to learn new skills, sharpen your mind, gain some insights, with Masterclass, you can learn from the world's best minds anytime, anywhere, at your own pace. You can learn how to use your voice as an instrument from Mariah Carey. You can improve business skills from Bob Iger. You can learn cooking from Gordon Ramsay. There's over 180 classes with a wide range of world-class instructors. Masterclass is accessible on your phone, web, smart TV. They're offering classes on a wide variety of topics, all taught by world-class instructors at the top of their field. Each class is broken down in individual video sessions, usually around 10 minutes. Members can explore at their own pace, and each class is supported by downloaded materials, class guides, recipes, or more. An annual membership starts at just $180 a year, and I highly recommend you check it out this holiday. Give one annual membership and get one free. Go to masterclass.com/lockedon today. That's masterclass.com/lockedonnba. Terms apply.
Andy, so before we get to this meeting, this is the question I wanted to ask you, because we are appearing Thursday night, heading out to the Spectrum Sportsnet studios to do the Lakers television stuff. One of the questions that they asked us is about sixth man of the year, and who would be the early sixth man of the year, votes, whatever, a month into the season. You, I believe, went with Benedict Mathurin, Indiana, who I think is actually the correct answer over my answer, Christian Wood. I kind of forgot about Mathurin because I was thinking about him so much for Rookie of the Year that I forgot he's the sixth man of the year. But regardless, the question I wanted to ask you is not obviously debating Mathurin versus Wood, because that's a debate for a different show. Where would you put Russ on that list?
I think he's been rising. I think he's definitely in the conversation. Whether this should be the way it is or not, if the Lakers don't win more games, Russell Westbrook is not going to be in this conversation. And also, too, with Russ, there's also that question of, will he get traded? If he gets traded, is he going to be on that team? Will he be a starter or a bench player on that team?
Sure.
I think there's a lot of uncertainty with Russ, but if you're asking me in terms of where I think he ranks right now,
like really just ignoring all that stuff, like if you were giving the award away today, like where is he on the list just based on performance to this point?
I think he's among the best candidates in terms of pure performance. If you're talking about what typically gets you the award, I think it's very difficult to win on a team that's 7 games below 500.
7 games below 500, 13 games into the season.
Like,
you might be able to squeak that out 82 games. Yeah. 13. I was just curious because it's not a great year for sixth man of the year yet. There aren't a whole lot, Wood and I think Mathurin are like the clear candidates right now.
Kevin Love's having a really strong year.
Yeah, but not quite. I think, I thought about him too. The story around Westbrook is just so fascinating because he has been way more productive than he certainly was as a starter last year with the Lakers. I think there is some boost that he gets in terms of like evaluating him from night to night, because people like he's getting some credit for doing the gig, just doing the gig and doing it without outward complaints, so that some of the rougher statistical nights are glossed over a little bit. But it's also interesting to me because when you evaluate a sixth man, outside of guys like Manu Ginobili, who's a Hall of Famer who played that role at a Hall of Fame level while he was doing it, most sixth men are kind of not that guy. So it's interesting to me, like as Russ moves into a sixth man role, and I agree. I think he's top 5, certainly, if you were going to do the voting right now.
I wouldn't argue.
The criteria for what quote unquote good Russ looks like ought to shift with it. Like he should no longer be, I think, graded on the former, year in, year out perennial all-star, triple-double machine Russell Westbrook. Like probably shouldn't have been, he hasn't been that guy, for a little bit. But like to me, it's almost like it's a reminder. It's like we're looking at a different set of criteria for deciding, in some ways, what an effective Westbrook is. And I think the question framed it for me in a way that I hadn't really thought of until we were, giving our answers to the studio people for the show.
Honestly, I think the last person to get that memo is Russ. I think everybody else reached this conclusion a few years ago. Russ is the last guy, I think, that is still evaluating himself through the triple-double prism.
But anyway, it was just something that got me thinking about the framing, and I was curious where you would put Russ in that. So Sunday before the Lakers played the Nets, sitting at 2-10 in a game where LeBron wasn't going to play. and they really needed to win. They apparently had a big time, air it all out, coaches, medical staff, players, everybody meeting. And we learned about it this week. First of all, what was your reaction when you heard that they had the meeting, the contents of the meeting, and then like your reaction to just these types of meetings in general?
I think it was needed. I mean, they clearly need to make sure that everybody's on the same page, or that they keep everybody on the same page. And if they're looking to pull themselves out of this morass, like, everybody has to be accountable, and everybody has to be willing to hold everybody else accountable. And holding everybody accountable is often a conversation that's unpleasant and uncomfortable. Like, there's a recent interview that Chris Haynes did over at Bleacher Report with Kevin Durant. And, there's a lot in there that was interesting, but Durant talking about the perception of him as a non-leader among superstars, which, for what it's worth, I think is accurate. He was talking about, like, with Russell Westbrook, excuse me, not with Russell Westbrook, played together, brain cramp, but Kyrie Irving. And, the idea that he didn't tell Kyrie that he needed to get the vaccine, or like the idea that he wouldn't get on Kyrie for him just deciding to take PTO, like in the middle of the season, or being away from the team, basically was just, he's a grown-ass man. I'm not going to tell a grown-ass man what to do. It's kind of your job to tell another grown-ass man what to do if you are one of the highest profile voices that matter, and nobody else can tell this grown-ass man what to do. If you're not going to do it, who will? And Durant, in this interview, seemed to have an attitude, because there was also the idea of, says he's happy, said that, he asked for a trade before because he didn't like the way certain things were, practices. Well, he said that he wanted to be coached harder, wanted to be called out more drills, which is interesting because Kyrie has described himself as a co-coach, and everyone's a co-coach. But, like, Durant seemed to have this attitude of, I'm going to do my thing here until I decide I'd like to do my thing somewhere else. And I'm going to let everybody else do their thing. And hopefully the hooping just works out. And that's not leadership. Like, that you can see where the Nets have turned into this place where nobody is ever held accountable or holding anyone else accountable for anything. And I say all that just to recognize this is the trap the Lakers could fall into if they don't recognize the need to have these conversations.
Yeah. And the challenge for Darvin, and this is where he needs LeBron, LeBron's been in a lot of situations, but not really one like this, where you got a 60 game progression in front of you, where you have to take a team. He's been on a lot of teams that were quite good, and maintain it, gear up for the playoffs and all that kind of stuff. And he's been on teams that sank over the course of a season. Remember, like, the Lakers weren't, I figure it was our friend Daman Rangula who noted, like, the Lakers weren't 7 or 8 games under 500 last season until game, I think it was 65, he said, something like that. So as bad as it seemed last year, the Lakers were still in that at 500, near 500, a game above, 2 games below, like, kind of hanging out in that space. It's very different than where they are this year. And the season before that, they were a good team until the wheels fell off and everybody got hurt. This is a different deal, and mentally it's a different deal. And so for Darvin, for LeBron, for AD, the challenge is, how do you stay focused on the long term? How do you not get ahead of yourselves, not get frustrated, continue to be honest with each other as this long, hopeful climb out of the hole that you're in goes on? Because they're going to be, knock on wood, times when it goes really well. They win 2 or 3 in a row, but they're also going to lose 2 or 3 in a row. Like, it's not going to look good all the time. And staying optimistic and keeping that belief is really hard. And I agree with you. It starts with things like this, where everybody is held accountable and nobody is allowed to give up, to let go of the proverbial rope, in the metaphor people like. So We'll see if it has any tangible impact going forward. But
I mean, they're 1-for-1.
yes,
In
I
terms of
suspect
games
they're
after
going
the
to.
meeting.
You can't have a meeting like that daily, but maintenance from that meeting is going to have to take place. Whatever they came up with, whatever processes and whatever they decided on to make sure that everybody continues to be held accountable, that everybody continues to be on the same page. The maintenance of that is going to be a real challenge. Let's get to the conversation you had with Darius, because it is a really interesting way to think about what the Lakers have in front of them. And it revolves around draft picks and the prospect of trading them and what really the Lakers have in their treasure chest of assets. We'll do that next.
Locked On Lakers brought to you by BetOnline. BetOnline.net, your number one source for sports betting information, stats, news, and analysis. Get the latest news and trends for every professional and amateur league out there, from football to basketball, soccer, and esports. They've got it all at BetOnline. And if you love sports podcasts, which of course you do, because you are listening to one right now, there are literally millions of them out there and like thousands of different categories. You're in a sports podcast. So guess what? You can find more information about sports through podcasts with BetOnline as well. That's always the fastest, easiest way to get your betting fix. So head to the website today or use your mobile device. Learn more about the trends in action. BetOnline where the game starts.
One of the things, Andy, that people talk about a lot is, and they'll often phrase it like this: the Lakers only have 2 draft picks between now and the end of the decade, 27 and 29. And that is not true. What is true is they only have the ability to trade 2 draft picks. They only have the ability to control and trade those 2 picks, 27 and 29. They
Right
have
now.
currently, as of today. But they have other picks. They are going to make a first round draft they have the opportunity to make a selection this summer. And in all but one, I think, going forward between now and the end. The only thing is they don't have is control over them or the ability to trade them. But that lack of precision is the subject of a column that Darius wrote for Silver Screen and Roll that kicked off a lot of conversation, because there really is, between you, the two of you, because there really is a big difference between the Lakers don't have draft picks except for 27 and 29, and the Lakers can't trade draft picks except for 27 and 29. Those are not the same thing.
Yeah, and there's a part of the piece from Darius, just to, as he said, literally using his own words to spell this out more clearly. In 2023, either 2024 or 2025, 26, 27, 28, and 29, the Lakers are guaranteed to have 1 first-round selection on draft night. In 2023, the Pelicans can choose to swap their own first-round pick with the Lakers pick. But again, this still equates to the Lakers having a pick. In either 24 or 25, the Lakers will send their own first-round pick to the Pelicans as part of the Anthony Davis trade. The Pelicans will choose which one they want, whether in 2024 or defer to the next season. And the point of Darius's piece was, as you mentioned, there's often a lack of precision in talking about this in media. And, he pointed out a few instances of this. I want to say in pieces from Chris Haynes, and I think a tweet from Sean Charania of The Athletic and Stadium. And, Darius pointed out to be, both Shams and Chris Haynes are very good at what they do. And they're very careful source. Like, they're not flamethrowers. They're not looking to just get clicks. But it can be difficult sometimes to summarize these things in 60-second TV or video hits.
Right, sure.
So you end up giving the summary in ways that doesn't allow all.
Right. The point isn't to call out other members of the media specifically. It's to call out the lack of distinction.
Right. But those two guys in reporting the Lakers' hesitancy to trade the picks is what prompted Darius to think about this in the first place, and just the idea. And this is something I hope you and I have done well. Like, I know I've gone out of my way to try to talk about 2027 and 2029 as the picks that they fully control right now, because they are the only ones that they fully control at the moment. I hope that we've been clear that they're not the only ones they're going to have between now and 29, but it's a reminder that you can always strive to be as clear as possible, and it never hurts to give very succinct reminders.
And it also, though, and this is the other, I think, point that he's making, is that it ought to provide greater context into what the Lakers have in terms of team building over the next few years, because it does make a difference. Like, if you're in your head, you're thinking the Lakers only have 2 first-round picks. Like, part of what is troubling them right now is the lack of access to talent with upside. It's the lack of access to players that can be effective and inexpensive. And, if you're going to have sort of a top-heavy payroll, and especially now, like, we've really run into an era where if you pick the right guy, players seem to be coming into the league ready to go. Not all of them, certain guys struggle more than others and all of that. But if you find the right guy, you can get players who can step in and be effective. And, whether it's a guy that, let's say the Pelicans, probably Pelicans pick for the Lakers this year, probably lands somewhere in the, low 20s, maybe high teens, low 20s, see what happens. Like, it's not crazy to think the Lakers could find a player who could help them more than somebody that they're picking off of the veterans minimum train that they've been on for the last couple of years. And if you have one of those guys every year, every other year, whatever, even if you'd rather they be the 7th pick, even if they're the 17th or the 27th pick, access to that talent is something that needs to go onto the ledger when you think about where the Lakers are and what they can have going forward. I do, though, want to remind people that the issue that should be made clear with those picks, 27 and 29, is not the Lakers are holding on to them because they desperately want to draft somebody who's in the 8th grade right now.
It drives me insane when I see that.
Because those are the only 2 picks they can trade currently. You only get to do it once. You only have access. Like, the other picks matter, but they don't matter for trades. Maybe on draft night, knowing the Lakers have a pick that they can essentially wrap a 3rd pick into for a trade, that's a reason perhaps to wait and make a trade, because you can make it better in the offseason by drafting somebody for somebody else and also including those 2 other picks. Like, that stuff matters. But for 2029, it's not because the Lakers are desperate to hold on. It's because you only get 1 crack to trade that pick, and you better do it right, because that's it.
Well, if you're talking, there's 2 separate things going on here. When you're talking about the short term, which is basically this season we're in or the following season, the 2 seasons that we know LeBron is going to be under contract with the Lakers, presumably, unless he asks for a trade this offseason.
Mm-hmm.
You have one real opportunity to do something with those 2 picks and whatever becomes of Russell Westbrook, either as a traded player or as an expiring contract, right, creating cap space.
Those 2 picks and those inside this season.
Right, inside this season, or to affect this coming season. Like, you have one, or maybe if you manage to do it really well this season, you do things that help you for both seasons. But in terms of the 2 seasons, this and next, that we're talking about, to make major improvements that would affect either one or both of those seasons, you have one opportunity for this. The other picks, though, what makes them really interesting is that they are definitely assets the Lakers have, and I would love to see them consider using them as actual draft capital that they value, because they want to have human players that join this team and they develop. And this is crazy to think about, maybe stay with the team for a while, especially, don't hear me out, the Lakers' strongest asset within the front office by far is their scouting department and their ability to draft. And it's not even close.
Yeah.
But even if you want to think about this purely as trade assets, it's difficult to plan around because you don't know exactly what you're going to have and when you're going to have it.
Right. And I think if you are
you don't have to sell either one of us on trying to actually draft young players and keep them. I know I, in particular, I've been on this train for a while. Like,
consistent.
yeah, keep some
I'll say
guys
this.
around. You're good at this.
Yeah, I'll say this, and we can quit here and see. Look, set our minds forward to the big Pistons game.
It is a big game, though.
Scarily enough,
it actually is a big.
Really
game.
is a massive, massive game. If you're looking for some upside to the Lakers not having sort of this gigantic cachet of assets, it actually makes them far more likely to end up using these picks for themselves and keeping them and whatever, because 123rd pick in the draft, 118th pick in the draft, whatever it might be, there's only so much value that you can get from that in terms of orchestrating a big trade. Just when you only have the one player and don't have 3 or 4 other young, whatever it is, like when you don't have a lot of stuff, that one sort of dangling first rounder that you can't trade until draft night or afterwards is harder to move. So it actually makes it more likely that the Lakers end up using those picks. Don't know where they're going to land. Don't know how valuable they'll be. But going forward, the picks that they actually have, they almost end up having to use for themselves. And so that is something else to think about. And I think a point that Darius made as well in his piece. So check it out. We'll tweet it, but you can find it on Silver Screen and Roll as well. Locked On Lakers on YouTube is where you go to check out the show and generally get a little bit early. Love the growing community there, whereas we're pushing towards 9,000 subscribers. The comments get longer and longer every day. More people participating. We love to see it. We try to wrap as much of that into the show as we can, but even when we don't, still a great place for you guys to go engage with other Lakers fans. All right, we'll see what happens on Friday and again on Sunday. Everybody have a great weekend.